So I'm coming up on a pretty exciting milestone. I'm getting ready to celebrate my 10 years of sobriety. A lot of you know my story, but for those of you that don't, I was a prescription drug addict, and Jesus set me free back in 2013. And I went to a place called Cumberland Heights, and I lived there for 30 days. And I was kind of raised in the church atmosphere where rehab wasn't really talked about, and it wasn't really something you did. You just kind of prayed and hoped it got better. And I always tell people, keep an open mind. God can use whatever He wants, and He used Cumberland Heights in my life. And I remember while I was there, I asked them, I said, how many of us are going to stay sober? And they said, about 10%. And I raised my hand again, and I said, how do I be sure that I'm part of that 10%? And they said, you have to listen to what we're telling you. And so I began to listen. Even things I didn't understand, even things that maybe I didn't even agree with, but I listened. And so when my 30 days was up and I went home, the next thing they told me to do was get a sponsor, and I did. And they said, we want you to do inpatient, and which means basically our outpatient, which basically means you're gonna be in rehab, but you're gonna go to different meetings and learn about addiction. And so I did that. I did that for 4 weeks, and then after that was over, I asked them what I should do next, and they said, well, go to 90 meetings in 90 days, 90 recovery meetings. And I thought, man, 90 meetings in 90 days, that's insane. But I did it. And I noticed that a lot of these meetings were in the basement of a church. And all of us know what happens upstairs. We all know that there's people praying, and there's people worshiping, and there's a preacher preaching, and people come to the altar, and people get help. But a lot of those people don't know what's happening in the basement on a Thursday night or a Wednesday night or Tuesday night. A lot of times it's those recovery meetings. So I sat down with a guy named Michael Farron and Tony Wood, and I had no plan of writing a song called The Basement. It wasn't in my notes, but I remember sitting down that day at the Word Music Building on Music Row and saying, I just keep seeing this basement. And they kind of asked what I meant, and I told them about my recovery story, and of course they knew I was in recovery, and I started telling them about those basements and what happened in those basements, and we wrote The Basement. And I think it is probably the most personal and vulnerable song that I've ever written. And I think what's cool about The Basement is that it's kind of a picture of your lowest point, your rock bottom. You're literally in the basement of a church. And I can't wait for people to one day see and realize that we all know what's going on upstairs in the sanctuary, but wait until you see what He's been doing in the basement.